At -71 degrees Celsius, the forest holds its breath. Trees crack under the weight of ice. Rivers freeze solid to the bottom. And predators, even the strongest, learn that survival is never guaranteed. Tonight, something was dying just outside Mikhail's door. Mikhail was 58 years old. His beard had gone grey years ago. His hands were scarred from a lifetime of hard work, and his eyes carried the particular weariness that's from living alone in one of the harshest environments on Earth. He had been a hunter once. In his younger years, he knew the forest. He knew its rhythms, its dangers, its unspoken rules. One of those rules was simple: never trust a wolf. His cabin sat at the edge of the Yakutian taiga, surrounded by thousands of square kilometers of frozen wilderness. The nearest village was 40 kilometers away, a 2-day walk in good weather, impossible in winter. He had built this life deliberately. After his wife passed, after his children moved to the cities and forgot to write, he had chosen solitude over loneliness. Out here, at least, silence was honest. It was late evening when he heard the sound. Not a howl, not a cry, just a low, wet breathing that didn't belong. Mikhail rose from his chair by the stove and moved to the small window. He wiped the frost from the glass with his sleeve and peered out into the darkness. At first he saw nothing, just snow, just shadows. But then, near the woodpile, something moved. He lit an oil lamp and stepped outside. The cold hit him immediately, sharp, absolute, merciless. His breath crystallized in the air, forming thick clouds that hung motionless before slowly falling as ice. The lamp cast a weak circle of orange light across the snow, and there, collapsed at the base of his woodpile, was a wolf. It was large, easily 50 kilograms. Its fur was thick and grey, darker along the spine, lighter at the chest, and it was bleeding. A deep gash ran along its hind leg, still fresh, still weeping red into the white snow beneath it. The wolf's head lifted slightly as Mikhail approached, its amber eyes dulled by pain and exhaustion fixed on him. But it didn't growl, didn't bare its teeth. It simply watched, too weak even to flee. Mikhail stopped 3 meters away. His mind moved quickly through possibilities. A trap, most likely, or a fight with another predator. The wound was bad. Without treatment, infection would set in within days, and at these temperatures, the wolf would be dead by morning. He should leave it. That was the smart choice. Wolves were dangerous, unpredictable. Even injured, it could bite, could lash out, could kill him if he got too close. And more than that, saving a predator meant competing with it for food. His supplies were limited. Every piece of meat he gave away was a meal he wouldn't have. But Mikhail had not become the kind of man who could walk away from suffering, not even when it was dangerous, not even when it made no sense. He returned to the cabin and gathered what he needed: thick leather gloves, a heavy wool blanket, rope, and a wooden board to use as a makeshift stretcher. Then he went back outside. The wolf watched him approach. Its breathing had become more labored. Its eyes tracked his movements, but showed no aggression, just exhaustion, just pain. Mikhail knelt slowly in the snow. He spoke, his voice low and steady. "I'm going to move you. Don't bite me." The wolf, of course, didn't understand the words, but perhaps it understood the tone. He spread the blanket beside the wolf, then carefully, so carefully, slid his gloved hands beneath its body. The animal was heavy, dead weight, and warm despite the cold. He lifted, muscles straining, and laid the wolf onto the blanket. It made no sound, didn't struggle, simply allowed itself to be moved. Mikhail dragged the wolf across the snow to the small barn beside his cabin. Inside, it was warmer, not by much, but enough to keep the worst of the cold at bay. He had a wood in the corner, used for drying furs and smoking meat. He lit it quickly, feeding it generous portions of wood he couldn't afford to spare. Then he turned his attention to the wound. The gash was deep but clean, no sign of infection yet. Mikhail cleaned it with melted snow and strips of cloth, working as gently as he could. The wolf flinched but didn't snap at him. He wrapped the leg tightly in bandages made from an old shirt, then covered the animal with 2 more blankets. The wolf's breathing steadied. Its eyes closed. And for the first time since Mikhail had found it, the creature seemed to relax. Mikhail sat down on a wooden stool nearby and watched. The stove crackled. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the barn walls, and in the silence that followed, a thought occurred to him. He had just saved the life of something that in another circumstance might have killed him. The first night passed without incident. Mikhail checked on the wolf every few hours, adding wood to the fire, replacing the blankets when they slipped. The animal slept deeply, its sides rising and falling in steady rhythm. By morning, the bleeding had stopped. By the second day, the wolf's eyes had regained a little focus. And by the third day, when Mikhail brought a bowl of water, the wolf drank. He started feeding it small portions of dried meat and fish, food meant for himself, carefully rationed. The wolf ate slowly at first, suspicious, but hunger eventually won. Day by day, its strength returned. Mikhail didn't name it, didn't try to pet it. He simply cared for it with the same quiet efficiency he applied to everything in his life. And the wolf, for its part, accepted his presence. It didn't growl when he entered the barn, didn't bare its teeth when he changed the bandages. It simply watched him, those amber eyes tracking every movement. 2 weeks passed, then 3. The wound began to heal, the edges closing, new fur starting to grow. The wolf could stand now, could walk, though it still favored the injured leg. Mikhail knew what came next. Wild animals belonged to the wild. He had done what he could. Soon, he would open the barn door and let nature reclaim what was hers. But he found himself hesitating, not because he wanted to keep the wolf, but because, for the first time in years, the silence of his life had been broken by something other than wind and wood smoke. There was presence now, breath, light. Still, on a clear morning in early March, Mikhail opened the barn door wide and stepped back. The wolf stood near the stove, its head tilted, watching him. Then it looked at the open door, at the forest beyond, at freedom. It took 3 slow steps forward, paused, looked back at Mikhail one last time. Then it walked out into the snow and disappeared into the tree line. Mikhail closed the door and returned to his cabin. He told himself he had done the right thing. He told himself it was better this way. He told himself that solitude was what he wanted. He almost believed it. The weeks that followed settled back into familiar patterns. Mikhail chopped wood, mended tools, rationed food, and waited for spring. The barn felt emptier now. The silence felt heavier, but he accepted it. This was the life he had chosen. Then, one afternoon, in late April, everything changed. Mikhail had ventured deeper into the forest than usual, searching for early spring plants and checking his old trap lines. The snow was melting, revealing patches of dark earth and dead grass. The air, while still cold, carried the faint promise of warmth. He was kneeling beside a frozen stream, filling his water skin, when he heard the sound. Heavy footsteps, breaking branches, something large moving through the undergrowth. He looked up. 30 meters away, emerging from a thicket of pine trees, was a brown bear, massive, easily 300 kilograms. It had just woken from hibernation, starving and aggressive, and it had caught Mikhail's scent. The bear stopped, raised its head, sniffed the air. Then it turned and locked eyes with him. Mikhail's blood went cold. He was too far from the cabin, too far from safety. His rifle was back home, leaning uselessly against the wall. He had nothing, no weapon, no defense, just open ground and a predator that could run faster than any human. The bear took a step forward, then another, its lips pulled back, revealing yellow teeth. A low growl rumbled from its chest. Mikhail stood slowly, careful not to make sudden movements. He knew the rules. Don't run, don't turn your back. Make yourself big. Make noise. But none of that mattered when the bear charged. It happened in seconds. The bear dropped to all fours and exploded forward, covering ground with terrifying speed. Mikhail had no time to think, no time to react. He could only watch as death closed the distance. And then, from the trees to his left, a grey shape launched itself into the clearing. The wolf. It hit the bear from the side with the full force of its body, jaws snapping at the larger animal's neck. The bear roared, twisting, swiping with massive claws. But the wolf was fast. It dodged, circled, snapped again. And it wasn't alone. 3 more wolves emerged from the forest. Then 5, then 7. A pack. They surrounded the bear, darting in and out, biting at its legs, its flanks, its face. The bear swung wildly, catching nothing but air. It bellowed in frustration and pain. And then, as quickly as the attack had begun, the pack drove the bear back, step by step. They forced it away from Mikhail, away from the clearing, back into the dense forest. The bear, realizing it was outnumbered, turned and fled, crashing through the undergrowth until the sound faded completely. Silence returned. Mikhail stood frozen, his heart hammering in his chest. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what had just happened. The wolves remained at the edge of the clearing, watching him, and at the front of the pack, standing closest, was the grey wolf with the scarred hind leg. Their eyes met. Mikhail saw recognition there, not gratitude. Animals don't think that way. But something, memory, perhaps, acknowledgement, a debt repaid. The wolf held his gaze for a long moment. Then it turned, and without a sound, the entire pack melted back into the forest. Gone, as suddenly as they had appeared. Mikhail sank to his knees in the snow. His hands were shaking, his vision blurred, and for the first time in years, maybe for the first time since his wife had died, he wept. Not from fear, not from relief, but from something deeper. Something he couldn't name. He had saved a life, and that life had saved him in return. The forest held its breath again, but this time, the silence felt different. Not empty, not heavy, just present. Mikhail eventually stood and began the long walk home. The sun was setting, painting the snow in shades of orange and gold. He thought about the wolf, about the choice he had made on that frozen night months ago, about the cost and the risk and the hunger. He didn't regret it, not once, because in the hardest place on earth, at the coldest edge of survival, he had learned something he thought he'd forgotten. That kindness echoes, that mercy is never wasted, and that even in a place designed to take everything away, a single act of compassion, quiet, small, witnessed by no one, can ripple forward in ways impossible to predict. The wolf was gone now, back to its pack, back to its life, and Mikhail returned to his cabin, to his solitude, to the rhythms he knew. But he was different. The silence was different. Because now he understood. He was not alone. He had never been alone. The forest remembered, and so would he. Spring came slowly to Yakutia, as it always did. Snow melted into rivers, ice cracked and broke, and life, patient, persistent, unstoppable, returned. Mikhail sat on the porch of his cabin one evening, watching the sun dip below the tree line. Smoke rose from his chimney. A cup of tea steamed in his weathered hand, and somewhere, deep in the forest, a wolf with a scarred leg ran with its pack under the same sky. No words, no promises, just 2 lives, intersecting briefly, changing everything, and sometimes in the coldest, hardest places. That's all it takes.